Emma had always believed that trust was the foundation of her marriage. For 8 years, she and Daniel had built a life of quiet intimacy, a bond strengthened by shared laughter, whispered confessions, and the comforting rhythm of familiarity. But familiarity, she realized now, could also be a slow unraveling. She hadn't expected their Friday night conversation to take such a turn. It started like any other, Daniel pouring them both a glass of wine, the dim glow of the kitchen lights softening the lines of his face. They had always been open with each other, or so she thought. But when he set his glass down and looked at her with an intensity she hadn't seen before, she knew something was different. "I want to tell you something," he said. Emma leaned in, intrigued by the uncharacteristic hesitation in his voice. "Go on." He exhaled, rubbing the base of his glass with his thumb. "I've been thinking a lot about us. About our marriage." Her stomach tightened. "What about it?" "We're happy," he said quickly. "At least I think we are. But I wonder if we're missing something." Emma frowned, her mind racing through possibilities. Was he unhappy? Bored? Had she been neglecting him in ways she hadn't realized? "Daniel, just say it. I want to see you with someone else." The words landed with the weight of a confession, raw and unfiltered. For a moment, Emma thought she had misheard him. Then, as the silence stretched between them, she realized she hadn't. Her breath caught in her throat. "What?" He met her gaze, steady, unapologetic. "I've been thinking about it for a while. The idea of you with another man. It excites me." Emma's pulse pounded. Disbelief. Confusion. A flicker of something else. Something she didn't dare name. Are you asking me to cheat on you?" "No," he leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "I'm asking you to explore. To step outside of what we've always known. With my permission. With my encouragement." She let out a sharp laugh, though nothing about this felt funny. "This is insane." "Is it?" His voice was calm, deliberate. "We love each other. We trust each other. What if this could bring us closer?" Emma pushed her chair back, the scrape of wood against tile echoing in the quiet kitchen. She needed air. This was not the conversation she had expected to have with her husband. "You want me to sleep with another man?" Saying it out loud made it feel even more surreal. "Yes." Her hands curled into fists. "Why?" He hesitated, then said, "Because I want to see you free. Desired. I want to see you experience pleasure in a way that's unfiltered." Emma's stomach churned. Was this some test? A trick? Or was there truth in what he was saying? She searched his face for any sign of doubt, but there was none. "Who are you?" she whispered. Daniel smiled, but there was something unreadable in his expression. "I'm still your husband. And I still love you." That night, Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind tangled in thoughts she had never dared entertain. The idea was absurd, reckless. But deep beneath her initial shock, something restless stirred. She thought about the way Daniel had looked at her, not with detachment but with longing. As if he truly wanted this. As if he wanted her to want it too. Days passed, yet the conversation refused to fade. She caught herself observing men differently, wondering, just for a second, what it might feel like to be seen, touched, claimed by someone who wasn't her husband. And then it happened. Chance meeting at a cafe. She had been waiting for her coffee when she felt it. An unmistakable gaze. She turned and met the eyes of a man who exuded confidence. His presence magnetic. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a slow, knowing smile that made her pulse skip. "Excuse me," he said smoothly. "But have we met before?" Emma swallowed, the weight of Daniel's words pressing against her consciousness. "No," she said, her voice steady. "But maybe we should." She wasn't sure why she said it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the echo of her husband's voice urging her toward something unknown. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the first step toward something she could never take back. Emma had always believed in control. She controlled her career, her emotions, and most of all, her desires. But as she sat across from Marcus in the dimly lit lounge, She felt that control slipping, one lingering glance at a time. He was different from Daniel in every way. Where Daniel was measured and composed, Marcus exuded an effortless confidence, his presence filling the space like a force of nature. His deep brown eyes studied her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "You hesitated," he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Emma blinked. "What?" "When I asked if we had met before," he continued, lips curving into a knowing smile. "You hesitated, as if part of you wanted to say yes." Her fingers tightened around her wine glass. He wasn't wrong. She had felt something, an inexplicable pull, a sense of inevitability. "I wasn't expecting this." She gestured between them, her words careful. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping just enough to make her shiver. "And now that you're here," she exhaled slowly, weighing her answer. A part of her still clung to reason, to the version of herself that wouldn't be sitting in a bar with a stranger, contemplating a betrayal she had permission to commit. But another part, one that had been buried beneath years of predictability, whispered something else entirely. "I don't know yet," she admitted. Marcus chuckled, his gaze never wavering. "Honest, I like that." The silence between them was thick with unspoken possibilities. Emma thought about Daniel, about his words, his permission. He had set her on this path, but now that she was here, she wasn't sure if she was walking toward something thrilling or something dangerous. Marcus seemed to sense her hesitation. He leaned back, giving her space but not distance. "Tell me about him." Emma hesitated, then said, "He's my husband." Marcus nodded. "And he wants this." A strange mix of guilt and excitement twisted inside her. "He says he does." Marcus studied her for a moment, then smiled. "Then the real question is, do you?" The answer lodged itself in her throat. She had spent so much time thinking about what Daniel wanted, what he had allowed. But what did she want? The bartender set down another drink, and as Emma reached for it, her fingers brushed Marcus's. A jolt of awareness shot through her. She didn't pull away. Neither did he. For the first time that night, she let herself imagine it. Really imagine it. Marcus's hands on her skin, his mouth claiming hers, the weight of his body pressing against hers in ways she hadn't experienced in years. Heat pooled in her stomach. She had already crossed the first line by being here. The next one felt dangerously close. Marcus tilted his head, reading her silence. "Emma." His voice was deep, steady. "You can leave whenever you want. But if you stay, you're making a choice." Choice. Not Daniel's. Not Marcus's. Hers. She swallowed, her pulse hammering against her ribs. If she walked away now, she could return to her life unchanged. If she stayed. She lifted her gaze, meeting Marcus's unflinching stare. "I'm staying." The words left her lips before she could second-guess them. Marcus's smile was slow, deliberate. He reached for her hand, his fingers grazing her palm with an intimacy that sent a shiver down her spine. "Then let's go." Emma took a breath. A deep, steadying breath. And then she followed him into the night. The elevator ride was silent except for the rhythmic hum of ascent. Emma stood beside Marcus, her breath shallow, her heart hammering against her ribs. The weight of her decision settled over her, thick and inescapable. She had followed him out of the lounge, out into the night, and now into this moment, a moment she could still turn away from. But she didn't. Marcus stood calm, his presence unwavering. He didn't touch her, didn't pressure her. He was giving her space, allowing her to choose. The realization sent a thrill through her. This wasn't something being done to her. It was something she was stepping into. When the doors slid open, he gestured for her to walk ahead. The corridor stretched before her, lined with dim sconces casting warm, intimate light against the walls. She hesitated only briefly before stepping forward, the soft hush of carpet swallowing the sound of her heels. She was hyper-aware of Marcus's presence behind her, the quiet confidence in his stride, the heat radiating from his body. Every step forward felt like crossing an unseen boundary, each footfall deepening the chasm between who she had been and who she was becoming. At the door, he reached into his pocket, retrieving the keycard. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "This is your last chance," he said, his voice a low murmur. "You can leave now and nothing changes. No harm, no regret." Her throat was dry. She thought of Daniel, of the permission he had given her, of the quiet curiosity that had taken root in her since that night in their kitchen. This was a door she could walk away from, or she could step through. She didn't speak. She simply reached out, her fingers brushing over Marcus's wrist as she took the keycard from him and slid it into the lock. The green light blinked. The door clicked open. Marcus exhaled, a small, knowing smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Then come in." The suite was spacious, bathed in soft golden light. A large window overlooked the city skyline, the glow of streetlights stretching far into the distance. Emma stepped inside, the air thick with unspoken anticipation. She turned, finding Marcus watching her, his dark eyes steady. There was no rush in his movements, no urgency. He was waiting, letting her set the pace. Her pulse roared in her ears. She had expected fear, guilt, hesitation. But instead there was something else. Quiet exhilaration. She stepped closer. Marcus's gaze dipped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "Are you sure?" No hesitation this time. "Yes." The word barely left her lips before he closed the space between them. His hands found her waist, steady and firm. The moment stretched, electric, before his lips finally met hers. The kiss was slow, deliberate, an exploration rather than a conquest. Emma melted into it, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt, grounding herself in the reality of this moment. She wasn't dreaming. She wasn't fantasizing. She was here. And she had never felt more awake.